Welcome to my channel. If you like it, leave a like and a comment. Enjoy watching. Kale's fingers trembled as he fought with the manual override. Sparks exploded from the control console as his ship spiraled through the burning atmosphere of Zarina Prime. Flames licked at the cockpit windows, and alarms shrieked like dying animals. There was no time for panic, only instinct. The surface loomed ahead, glowing with unnatural hues, crimson plains cut with glimmering rivers of liquid light. As the ship crashed into the crystalline crust, the world turned to thunder. The impact shattered steel, cracked bones, and left Kale unconscious, buried under smoke and twisted metal. He awoke to silence. Pain bloomed in his chest, and the copper taste of blood filled his mouth. Through the wreckage, he saw shadows moving, figures tall and luminescent, their bodies semi-transparent like carved ice. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. One placed a cold, six-fingered hand on his forehead. His world went black again. When he next opened his eyes, he was no longer in the ship. A dome of pale blue light pulsed overhead, and he was bound, arms spread wide, in a hovering field of suspended crystal. The room shimmered with unnatural geometry. No corners, only endless curves and impossible angles. It felt like being trapped in a dream sculpted by a being that had never known sleep. Then she walked in. Aliari of the North Spire. Her form was as flawless as it was cruel. Tall, elegant, with veins of glowing frost beneath translucent skin. Her hair moved like liquid silver, her gaze sharper than blades. Eyes of deep indigo scanned him, not with curiosity, but judgment. "You bleed," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally in the chamber. "That tends to happen when you crash at terminal velocity," Kale muttered, the sarcasm half deliberate, half reflex. She stepped closer. The air around her grew colder, frost creeping up the edges of his restraints. "You are human. From Sol. The unstable world with death-wrought jungles and burning skies. Your kind is not welcome here." "I didn't exactly book a vacation package, lady." The restraint field pulsed as Aliari raised one elegant hand. It tightened, just enough to remind him how fragile he really was. "You will answer our inquiries. You will be examined. And when the council deems you of no value, you will be disposed of." She turned to leave. "I have knowledge," Kale shouted after her. "About the core. About how to fix your decaying biospires. I've read the Zeranan archives. I know you're dying slowly, even if you pretend otherwise." That stopped her. Her back tensed, her breath caught, but only for a second. Then she turned, slow and controlled, and looked at him with something different. Not trust, not belief, but the barest flicker of doubt. "No human could have accessed our archives. They are not digital. They are living constructs bound to genetic resonance. I had help. From one of yours. A defector. Name." Kale shook his head. "You'll kill them. Or worse. No. You want my cooperation? Unshackle me. Talk to me. Stop treating me like a thing." Aliari stared at him for a long moment. Her face was unreadable, carved from ice and pride. "I do not trust you, Terran." "Good," Kale said, a crooked smile forming on his bruised lips. "That makes us even." The chamber dimmed. Aliari didn't reply. But she didn't signal for his execution either. She simply walked out, the doors sealing behind her with a whisper of frost and light. Kale exhaled slowly, staring at the strange patterns shifting across the ceiling. He didn't know it yet, but something had changed in her. Not much. Just a crack. But it was the first crack in a wall that had stood untouched for centuries. And through it light would pour. Aliari stood in the observation chamber, hands folded behind her back, watching the human on the holosphere. Kale paced within the crystalline prison, sometimes muttering to himself, sometimes staring straight at the walls as if challenging them to reveal their secrets. For 3 full Zeranin cycles, she had monitored him. She told herself it was protocol. She told herself it was for the good of the spire. But her fingers had begun to tremble, only slightly, when he spoke her name aloud. She had never trembled before. Not in the vortex storms of Zelter. Not when her sister was shattered in the war of reflections. Not when the elder of the third breath offered her immortality at the cost of her last tear. But now she did. And it infuriated her. Her breath steamed in the cold air as she turned away from the feed and stepped through the crystalline arch. The chamber where Kale was held shimmered to life around her, its inner climate regulated by the living walls. As she entered, the restraints dissolved with a sound like breaking ice. Kale looked up, surprised. "You're not dead," he said, rubbing his wrists. "Nice. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about your favorite prisoner." Aliari didn't smile. She didn't respond with sarcasm or threats, as she might have a few cycles ago. Instead, she looked him over, as if trying to understand something she couldn't quite name. "You spoke of a defector," she said. "You will tell me who?" Kale shook his head, sitting on the edge of the crystal bench that served as a bed. "I will. Just not yet. Not until you believe I'm not your enemy." Aliari's eyes narrowed. "You broke our laws. You fell from the sky with unclean technology. You endangered our balance." "I saved one of your people," Kale said softly. "A child. In the southern gardens. Don't pretend you haven't heard." She froze. The memory surfaced unbidden. The youngling who had wandered too close to a soul chasm, the howling winds beginning to pull her into the void. And Kale, against all logic, diving forward, anchoring himself with a jagged root, catching the child by the wrist and pulling her back just before the abyss could swallow her. He'd been burned by raw crystal energy. His blood still stained the edge of the garden. "You risked your life," Aliari murmured, her voice distant. "I'm human," Kale replied. "Risking our lives is kind of what we do." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Aliari crossed the chamber and sat beside him, her movements graceful, controlled. The temperature dropped slightly as her presence neared him, and a sheen of frost crept along the surface of the bench. Kale didn't flinch. "You're not like the others I've studied," she said after a moment. "You're louder. Messier. Your thoughts ripple outwards instead of remaining contained. You're like a storm with no center." Kale glanced at her. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It is," she whispered. "For me." He turned to face her fully, his expression softening. "What's happening to you?" Aliari hesitated. For the first time in 1,000 years, she didn't know how to answer. "There is a rhythm," she finally said. "A resonance in our kind. It is what sustains our immortality. When we connect too deeply with something foreign, something emotional, it changes us. It disrupts the resonance." "You're saying I'm breaking your immortality?" Her gaze met his, and this time it didn't feel cold. "Yes." Kale swallowed. "Then why keep coming back?" Aliari stood abruptly, her expression unreadable. But as she turned, her fingers brushed his hand. An accident, perhaps. Or something else. The contact sent a ripple through her veins, a trembling beneath her skin that made her pulse echo for the first time in centuries. He watched her, breath caught in his throat. "You asked why I keep returning," she said quietly, without facing him. "I don't know yet, but I fear the answer." The doors opened around her, flooding the chamber with blue light, and she stepped through without another word. Kale remained still, his heart pounding in the silence. He hadn't imagined it. Her hand had lingered just long enough to spark something real. And for the first time since he crashed here, Kale felt that whatever was happening between them, It would change not only their lives, but the fate of their entire world. The sky above the north spire shimmered with the aurora of Zarina's twin moons, the light filtering through the crystalline towers in waves of violet and silver. Deep inside the spire, where the oldest chambers lay untouched by time, Cale sat with his back against a glowing pillar, waiting for her. He wasn't sure she would come. He had risked everything by escaping his assigned quarters. The crystal paths were alive, shifting with thought and memory. They could crush him in an instant if the elders willed it. But he knew this chamber was beyond their notice, an abandoned sanctuary long since locked away. Aliari had brought him here once, in silence, her eyes softer than usual, her body tense. He remembered her fingertips trailing the walls as if she mourned them. Now, he waited in the dark, heart pounding. And then she came. Aliari stepped into the chamber soundlessly, her cloak drawn around her shoulders, her face unreadable. The crystals glowed brighter in her presence, as if recognizing their own. But Cale could see the change in her now. The glow beneath her skin had dimmed slightly. Her light was thinning. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You came," Cale answered. She didn't reply immediately. She walked past him, resting her hand on the heartstone at the center of the room. It pulsed once beneath her touch, a slow beat like a dying star. She closed her eyes. "I feel it slipping," she whispered. "Your immortality?" Cale stood slowly. "Because of me? Because of us?" She turned, and in her face there was no more pretense. Only fear. Only longing. "We were never meant to bond," she said. "Zarinans are designed for solitude. For endurance. Love, desire, emotion, it unravels us. The resonance falters. The immortality fractures. I was trained to suppress all of it. Until you." Cale stepped closer. "So why not stop? Why not walk away?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she reached up and touched his face, her fingers icy against his skin. He didn't move. He let her explore him, every line, every scar, as if trying to memorize something she knew she would soon lose. "I've tried," she said softly. "But every time I close my eyes, I see your hands catching the child. I hear the way you speak without caution. You feel everything, even when it hurts. And I." He kissed her. There was no plan, no calculation, only the moment and the heartbeat between them. Her body froze at first, rigid and trembling, but only for a second. Then her arms wrapped around him, and the cold of her skin gave way to warmth. Her glow flared and cracked like a shattered mirror. Something ancient inside her broke. And in its place, something new was born. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "I can feel my core destabilizing," she said with a trembling laugh. "I should be terrified." "But you're not," Cale whispered. "No, I'm not." They sank to the floor of the sanctuary, wrapped in one another. The walls pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. The chamber, the spire itself, seemed to hold its breath. Later, Aliari lay curled against him, her skin now warm to the touch. Her glow dimmed but steady. Cale stroked her silver hair, still unable to believe she was real. "You've given up something eternal," he said quietly. "For this." "I've given up what they told me was eternal," she corrected. "But this, what we have, it feels more infinite than all the time I've lived." He kissed her forehead. "They'll come for us. I know. And we'll fight. Together." She placed his hand over the center of her chest. "Can you feel it?" she asked. He nodded. There, beneath her palm, a soft thrum. A heartbeat. She had never had one before. The exiled sanctum beneath the silent dunes hummed with hidden power. Carved into the base of the ancient continent, it was once a tomb for fallen Zarinan philosophers, now long forgotten. Aliari had led Kale here in secret, following whispers passed down only in the minds of those who had touched the spire's living memory. 4 weeks, they remained hidden. The spires searched, but the sentient sands refused to betray them. Aliari's once glowing skin had faded to a more translucent hue, her eyes dimming, but never dull. She no longer floated or shimmered as she once had. She walked now, left footprints in the sand, breathed in sleep. And within her, something impossible was growing. Kale stood near the mineral pool, watching the crystalline water ripple with colors whenever Aliari stepped near. Her body, though no longer immortal, seemed infused with a different energy. More chaotic. More alive. "It's accelerating," she said, her voice hushed as she placed his hand gently against her abdomen. "I can feel him. Every day stronger. Faster." Kale swallowed hard, awed by the faint vibration he felt beneath her skin. The pulse of life. Hybrid, volatile, and beautiful. "Are you sure it's a him?" he asked, trying to smile. "No," Aliari whispered. "But I saw him in my dream. Tall. Wild eyes. A heart that burns like yours." The wind outside howled across the dunes, and Kale stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her. He kissed the top of her head. "He'll have your strength too," he murmured. "And your mind. And your recklessness," she said with a smirk. They both laughed, softly, tiredly. Then Aliari stepped back, expression shifting. "We need to prepare him," she said. "He won't be like us. Not truly Zeranin, not fully human. His resonance, it doesn't match the harmonies of the world. If he's discovered, they'll fear him. Hunt him." Kale's jaw tensed. "Then we teach him to defend himself." The days blurred together after that. Aliari taught Kale how to read the living crystal, how to manipulate resonance through thought and breath. She passed on forbidden techniques once reserved for the Elder Guard, methods of bending force, shattering matter with frequency, cloaking in stillness. She grew weaker with each lesson, but she pushed herself. Because she knew her child would need a protector. Kale, for his part, trained his body beyond exhaustion. He carved weapons from the bones of the dunes, shaped armor with ancient mineral forges. He taught Aliari the brute physical tactics of humans, dirty, efficient, lethal. And then, on a night of twin eclipses, the child came. The walls of the sanctum trembled. Crystals moaned under pressure. Light flared from every surface, refracting off the curved walls like a supernova trapped in a bottle. Aliari's cries echoed through the hollow tomb, her body glowing with unstable energy. Kale knelt beside her, eyes wide with awe and terror. She gripped his hand, her fingers like burning ice. "I can't, Kale, it's too much," she gasped. "You can," he said, voice low but firm. "You are the strongest being I've ever known. You're not doing this alone." And she didn't. As the first rays of light broke through a narrow crack in the ceiling, a single cry rang out. Not like a human cry. Not like a Zeranin song. Something new. Something raw. Aliari collapsed into Kale's arms, their child pressed gently against her chest, glowing softly in places where skin met crystal. His hair was dark but laced with shimmering strands. His eyes opened, silver and gold and pulsing like stars. Kale stared, breath stolen from his chest. "Riven," Aliari said, her voice almost gone. "His name is Riven." Kale nodded, his arms tightening around both of them. "Hello, Riven," he whispered. "Welcome to a world that won't understand you." The walls trembled again. But this time, it wasn't the birth. The spires had found them. A blast tore through the outer sanctuary, and the shriek of sentinel-forged crystal echoed down the corridors. Aliari stood, still weak, but her eyes like burning frost. "You said you'd teach him to fight," she said, her voice now a blade. Kale kissed her fiercely. "Let's start with surviving." And in the next moment, the tomb became a fortress. A mother and a father stood in defiance. And in the cradle of their arms, the future opened his eyes. The sky above the silent dunes darkened unnaturally. There were no clouds, no storms, only a thick black mass of shimmering crystal drones that moved like a single, breathing organism. The Sentinels had arrived. Forged in the crucibles of the immortal spires, these machines of ancient power were programmed with one directive: destroy anything that threatened the purity of Zeranan bloodlines. Aliari stood barefoot at the entrance of the sanctuary, her pale hair whipping around her shoulders in the rising wind. The glow beneath her skin had faded, but her eyes still burned. Behind her, Kale fastened the last segment of his armor. Makeshift, cobbled together from Zeranan minerals, but reinforced with human ingenuity. On his back, a blade carved from a shard of the heart spire. He glanced down at their child, only days old but already able to sit upright. Riven's gaze tracked the sound of approaching danger, eyes glowing brighter with each pulse of the threat. "He feels them," Kale said. "They're resonating, and he's answering." Aliari looked over her shoulder. "Then he's already more powerful than they imagined." The ground rumbled. Then they came. Dozens of sentinels descended in coordinated spirals. They weren't machines in the human sense. No wires, no metal. They were living constructs of sentient crystal, with hollow eyes and limbs like jagged lightning. Their movements were silent. Their presence, suffocating. The lead sentinel touched the sand and began to speak, not with sound, but vibration. The words formed in the skull like an overwhelming hum of thought. "Surrender the offspring. Your transgressions may be forgiven." Kale stepped forward, planting his feet. "Come take him." The sentinel's body shifted slightly, recognizing the challenge. Aliari raised both hands, her palms glowing faintly. "You'll regret stepping onto this sand." The first wave attacked. It was fast, faster than Kale expected, but not faster than Aliari. Though weakened, her reflexes remained deadly. She spun through the air, using resonance fields to redirect enemy strikes. Her arms sliced through crystal constructs, waves of force blasting them into shards. Kale fought beside her, raw and vicious. He had no grace, no elegance, but he was relentless. Every punch cracked armor. Every strike left dents. He moved with a soldier's fury and a father's purpose. Then, one of the sentinels broke through the line and lunged toward the sanctuary. Riven raised a hand. The construct froze mid-air. It didn't fall. It didn't disintegrate. It simply stopped existing. Kale and Aliari turned, stunned. Riven sat in the center of a glowing ring of energy. His body pulsed with light neither human nor Zeranan. His eyes glowed like twin stars. The sand beneath him had turned to glass. "He's awakening," Aliari whispered. Kale's grip tightened around his weapon. "And the spires will burn when he fully does." The sentinels hesitated. The resonance in the air had shifted. No longer aligned to their frequencies. Something new was singing in the space between atoms. It was wild, unstable, and they didn't understand it. That made them afraid. But fear made them violent. The final wave came, larger, faster, stronger. Among them stood a towering figure wrapped in armor of black crystal. Maver, the Eternal Blade, Aliari's former mentor and the most feared enforcer of the spires. His presence cracked the ground as he walked. "Aliari," he said aloud, his voice like metal tearing through silk. "You were our jewel. Now you are rust." "You trained me well," she replied, stepping forward. "Let's see if you regret that." Their battle shook the sanctuary. Aliari danced through the air, light weaving around her fingers like a dying sun. Maver met every strike with brutal efficiency, his blade singing in perfect resonance. He was older, stronger, But she was unpredictable now, human in part. And unpredictable was dangerous. Meanwhile, Kale fought off wave after wave, his armor fractured, blood staining the sand. He moved not like a warrior, but a man who refused to let his family fall. Every time he faltered, he looked back and saw Riven watching. And somehow, that kept him standing. Then Maver struck Aliari hard enough to send her flying into the sanctuary wall. She crumpled to the ground, unmoving. Kale screamed and charged. Maver turned, his blade rising. But before it fell, time bent. A scream echoed through the battlefield. Not Aliari's, not Kale's. Riven had stood. His tiny hands clenched. His body enveloped in a radiant storm of ice and flame. His power tore the sky open. The sentinels nearest to him disintegrated in an instant, their forms unable to comprehend his existence. Maver paused. Kale reached Aliari and pulled her close. Her eyes fluttered open, and a weak smile touched her lips. "I told you," she whispered, blood on her lips. "He'll be more than either of us." Kale kissed her, once, as the world cracked around them. And above, Riven rose into the air, floating in a storm of his own making. The spires would never forget this day, because the forbidden child had chosen to fight. The sky over Zarina Prime cracked like a stained mirror. Above the battlefield, Riven floated in perfect stillness, his small frame engulfed in a swirling storm of heat and frost. His presence disrupted the harmony of the land itself. Resonance crystals shattered without touch, ancient trees bent toward him as if bowing, and even the stars overhead dimmed as if watching. Kale stood below, his arms wrapped protectively around Aliari. Her body was weak, fragile even, but her heart beat steadily against his. She looked up at their son and whispered something Kale couldn't hear, her lips forming words in the old tongue of the Spirebloods. The sentinels began to retreat. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't fear. It was reverence. The energy surrounding Riven was not destruction. It was something more profound: creation, chaos, choice. His very existence was rewriting the laws that had ruled Zarina for thousands of years. And then Maver rose again. Though scorched and cracked, the eternal blade refused to fall. He limped toward Kale and Aliari, dragging his blade through the sand, carving a trail of molten crystal behind him. His eyes were wild, filled with fury and desperation. "You were meant to be eternal," he rasped to Aliari. "Perfect. Untouched. And you let a Terran defile everything." Kale stepped between them. He didn't speak. He simply raised his weapon and waited. Maver charged. Riven moved. Time slowed. In a blink, the boy was between his father and the assassin. His small hand caught Maver's blade mid-strike, stopping it as if it had struck the surface of a star. Energy radiated from Riven's fingers, spreading through the blade. Maver cried out as the crystal weapon dissolved, piece by piece, into harmless motes of light. Then the light reached him. Kale expected it to kill Maver. But it didn't. The energy didn't destroy, it transformed. Maver staggered backward as the black crystal armor crumbled off his body. His limbs, once hard and perfect, began to resemble flesh. For the first time in centuries, the eternal blade was mortal. He fell to his knees and wept. Behind him, the remaining sentinels powered down, one by one, as if following an unspoken order. Kale stood in stunned silence. Aliari, tears in her eyes, reached out and called softly, "Riven." The boy turned, and slowly, gently, he drifted back into her arms. Her body absorbed the warmth of him. Her cheek pressed to his, their shared resonance creating a soft, golden glow around them. Kale wrapped them both in his arms, grounding the moment, holding the two hearts that had changed his world forever. Hours passed before the last of the wind stilled. The spires no longer spoke. The elders, silent. No punishment came. No armies rose. For the first time in living memory, the planet itself rested. Word spread across the continents. Of the forbidden child who had halted war. Of the human who had tamed a frost-born goddess. Of the immortal who gave up eternity for love, and was repaid not with death, but life. 1 month later, under the new twin sunrise, Kale and Aliari stood atop the sanctuary spire, rebuilt not as a weapon, but a place of peace. All races were invited. Human, Zeranan, hybrid. The cold laws of old had melted under the fire of something stronger. Together, Kale and Aliari planted the seed of unity into the earth, a new crystal that pulsed in tune with Riven's heartbeat. A symbol that harmony had replaced hierarchy. As for Riven, he grew faster than any child Kale had ever known, but with laughter in his soul. He no longer burned when he touched. He no longer froze the ground he walked on. With every embrace, with every smile, he grew more human. And more Zeranan. At once. That night, under the soft stars of a healed world, Kale held Aliari close in their shared chamber. She wore no armor, no ancient garb, just a simple wrap of soft silk, her hair spilling over her shoulder. Her body was warm now. She dreamed. She aged. She loved. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, then whispered into her ear. "You still glow, you know." She smiled sleepily. "So do you. Just more slowly." They both laughed, quiet and free. Outside, Riven slept in his own room, the glow from his palms casting shapes onto the walls like living stories. And beneath the floor, far below the sanctuary, the heart of the planet pulsed in perfect harmony with theirs. Not as gods, not as warriors, but as family, forever.